so Kevin Bradley, architect, and myself were the designers on the project, and was supported by the rest of the Designing Up Crime team. And it was a fantastic project that really valued the importance of design as a process problem solving with the stakeholders, and really appreciated the fact that the design of physical spaces could play a key role in the effectiveness of learning and personal growth.
Needs to be not
So, in its essence, was to design a series of buildings, classrooms and teaching facilities, as well as all of the furniture and the landscaping that we use as an educational centre. And all of the facilities and products and landscaping will all be manufactured within correctional service industries and linked to the rehabilitation and education programs. So the brief that we were provided with outlined a whole range of really amazing qualities, and it was to link in with this intensive learning centre program which was being trialled and been sort of already incorporated at the John Maroney Centre since 2004, and the program was trying to set up a 6-month intensive course which was sort of trying to address some of the limitations of education within corrective services, which had been handled up until that point in a fairly ad hoc way. Some of the facilities were happening in industry buildings, and also the programming was being affected by disruptions such as lockdowns and teacher-free days and things like that. So they wanted to set up a 6-month intensive program which would start sort of focusing on rehabilitation and teaching employable skills. So things such as numeracy, literacy, creative thinking, communication, ICT and such, and also looking at developing personal skills such as connection with family and community. They wanted the learners to be excited to learn, engage within the space. They also wanted to support the staff and upskill them within a 21st century engaging environment. And the space itself had to be a therapeutic space. It had to be also sort of dynamic and agile and future-proof to the sort of future ways of learning. So we were provided with all these wonderful range of qualities. And sort of in order to develop a space which embodied such a level of sensitivity, we found it really valuable to distill all these into a common vision, and that was to create a pathway between a place where the learner currently stood and a place of citizenship, and new learners entering the facility, entering the learning program, were surrounded by a whole series of boundaries which stood between them and the outside world. And looking at designing our problems has a wonderful approach of reframing the problem. So we tried to reframe these levels of boundaries in different areas of opportunity for interaction and learning. We looked at them at different levels of scales of community, which we could provide a supportive pathway through. We also wanted the space to be culturally sensitive. There was a whole range of cultures within the spaces, and there was a large population of Aboriginal learners within the space. We wanted the space to represent the Aboriginal learners, but without resorting to tokenism. We also wanted to do it to an extent that we didn't actually exclude the non-Aboriginal learners. And a way that we wanted to approach this was sort of creating a true cultural interface between the two knowledge streams. And that area in the middle, providing a discourse between the two, would provide critical thinking, area of innovation, and allow both of them to operate creatively within the community without neglecting the cultural identity. So the way that the project was approached was in a whole range of ways. Sort of starting off with standard research and really kind of doing deep dives, and none of us, the designers anyway, had great experience within corrective service up until now. So it was all within sort of designing education facilities. So it was about sort of really learning as much as we could around that, around Aboriginal learning, around sort of different architectural topographies, and as well as sort of relevant technology as well. And then we conducted a range of site visits to potential sites, and they were really, really valuable. And all the teachers, the teaching staff and the corrective services staff were so open, and they were really valuable with their time, and they gave us this incredible insight. So this is some images inside one of the centres, which was running an education program. And it was a converted industries building. They were stuck in there for sort of 8 hours a day, and it wasn't really conducive to learning. And throughout this time, we sort of got to see the whole place filled with learners. We got to see them sort of in the lunch area and sort of crammed in, pacing around. We got to see them sort of in the sort of class environment. We got to sort of talk to a lot of them quite closely, as well as the teacher staff. And then Designing Out Crime ran a fantastic co-design workshop where we sort of flew in all the key stakeholders from construction, from security, from education, as well as from corrective services. And it was a really valuable day to get everything on the table, and we really made sure that every single person was heard and all the needs from each different department was catered for. And within that, we first sort of distilled all of the information from the original site visits and posted up on the walls. We printed out a range of quotes from both inmates and learners, and tried to create as much stimulation as we could. And throughout that, a lot of things really emerged. I mean, it was the first time that we sort of started generating ideas, and we were kind of worried that we were going to be under a whole strict series of regulations and limitations with security. And it was things, like the head of security was like, oh, we should put in a running track around the perimeter, and we should put a wood feature in. And it was the first time that we actually thought, okay, these guys are open to change, and we can have a bit of fun with this. And then the next step was talking to the inmates, and we got them to answer a range of questions on the way that the space they were currently in was successful and unsuccessful, and then visions they had for the development of the future centre. And a lot of these ideas were incorporated into the design. This one in particular has saunas, pools and stripper poles, which we couldn't incorporate. And then it was the task of relaying all that material that we gathered back into this framework and trying to assess all these qualities and where they fit into this framework. And was it about developing a connection with the learner himself, or was it about developing connections with the learner and the peers or the rest of the class, the centre, and so forth. And then this framework was then sort of translated into a design approach, which allowed us to sort of start curating the behaviour within the various spaces. So these are sort of used as touch points within the space. So whether that included small individual spaces for private learning, or informal conversations between a teacher and one learner, or sort of Skype areas which will allow them to connect with the broader community, smaller group work. The space at the front is a peer-to-peer, it's like a big workbench for sort of men to stand around, chew the fat, do small motors, woodworking, and that kind of exchange. Or larger areas in the middle for a whole group learning. And then 2 modules joined together to provide an even larger area for interaction and learning. And then that philosophy was also embodied within the furniture. It was embodied in all scales. And within the furniture in particular, it was the desks, for instance, were designed in a way to sort of facilitate this flow of interaction. And it also sort of incorporated some of the Aboriginal learning styles which we read about and spoke about, which included the importance of, or the value in starting off new knowledge as a whole group, and then breaking off into smaller groups for problem solving, owning that knowledge as an individual, and then the importance of returning that knowledge back to community. So this would also allow things to be set up to do peer review, work review, or call other classes in to do exhibitions and so forth. This was also incorporated into a yarn circle, which was in the garden, which valued the importance of storytelling in Aboriginal learning, and provided a place of performance, ritual, and also to be used for peer-to-peer knowledge sharing. And then it was the task of embodying that on the whole scale of the site plan, and that included starting to look at the spaces between all these buildings. So there's 2 individual classrooms, a library, a joint classroom, office, and toilet block. And then sort of looking at these areas in the middle which could bring together the whole centre as a performance or as an assembly, and then sort of through the library offering connections to the rest of the centre, calling people in for short courses, or even the sort of broader community for graduation ceremonies and so forth. Within managing all of the stakeholders, every stakeholder had their own hidden agendas or their own non-hidden agendas, and there was strict constraints to do with security, to do with construction. We were also under a pretty tight budget. We also needed to be careful of the way that we were to public opinion and perception. We didn't want this place to look sort of feel too outlandish. So what we decided to do is keep things pretty simple, but focus on the architect put nicely on moments. So little moments of magic, and one of them was the curved roof, which provide a contrast to the rigour of the rest of the centre, as well as providing a calm, creative space and representing this metaphor of the cloud which passed over the common sky. The same sort of approach was taken within this furniture, where we could utilise very simple, basic construction processes such as welding and flat panel constructions, but then utilise things such as art panel, which would allow the users to start customising the space and developing ownership. We also proposed a climbing wall, which unfortunately wasn't. But it did provide a valuable tool, which we realised later as a bit of a sort of scapegoat, where the stakeholders they got something to kind of to do, and then we kind of got a whole lot of stuff. And then, throughout the whole process, there's been a heavy involvement from all the people involved. We sort of nominated inmate delegates, which we got to review all of the research and all of the concepts. And then there were sort of monthly meetings with all the people, sort of right through from the teachers all the way up to the assistant commissioner. And that included some video links with all the other centres and everyone involved. And now it comes time to sort of handing it over, where they've actually realised the importance of keeping us involved, and they've sort of said, we want to set up a project control group and want you guys to be involved up until and then beyond that.